right, we're going to do a lesson on the market revolution, explaining how the market revolution sort of transitions the American economy and gets it ready for the Industrial Revolution. And we're also going to go over the Texas fight for independence, the Mexican-American War. So those are some big ideas and key concepts that we're going to cover in this lesson. Now, this is going to go pretty fast. And I want you to think analytically as we go through this new information and think, the how and the why. Why is this important on a larger scale? How does it affect the nation socially, politically, economically, culturally? So analytically try and break down this information as it's introduced to you through lecture. Let's begin with a description of what the market revolution is. Okay, so the market revolution begins in the early 1800s, and it's just an economic shift. It's kind of defined as the predecessor to the Industrial Revolution, where the American economy becomes more capitalistic, okay? Instead of people having home economies, sort of subsistence economies, and making the things that they consume, they begin to specialize in the production of certain goods, and that kind of specialization allows for better quality goods, larger numbers of goods, which when you have higher volume or more supply, it's going to lower the price of goods. And so many people, especially in the Northeast, for the first time will leave their homes to go to work. They'll go to factories and work in factories. This kind of capitalism is what our country is based on. Now, what is capitalism? It's the basis for the American economic system, and it's a type of economy in which citizens, private citizens or individuals, own the factors of production. That is the opposite of a type of economy in which the government owns factors of production. And this allows for the risk takers to create new inventions and take risks and potentially make a lot of profit in taking these economic risks. One example of an entrepreneur or one of the risk takers during this early age of the market revolution is Goodyear, Charles Goodyear. Goodyear creates vulcanized rubber, and vulcanized rubber is rubber that doesn't melt when it gets hot and it doesn't freeze when it gets really cold. And this transforms industries. Initially, vulcanized rubber is first used in the production of shoes, ironically, but then it's going to be transmitted to other things, particularly in the late 1800s when it's used for tires on automobiles. It's going to become an industry in which there's a lot of investment. So it's 1839 and vulcanized rubber. Okay, so we also see the emergence of sewing machines during the market revolution. So sewing machines are revolutionary in that they allow for mass production of clothing. So for the first time in the early 1800s, people are buying finished clothing goods, and shoes is one of those very first clothing goods that people buy instead of make. Sewing machines allow for the eventual marketing of other clothing items, men's suits and women's hats and women's dresses. And because this Industrial Revolution allows these goods to be produced on a large scale, the price for these goods will fall and more people will have access to these consumer goods. Now, it is very important to recognize that this market revolution really impacts the northeastern part of the nation, and the South pretty much misses out on the market revolution. They continue very much the way that they had been previously. Okay, so household economies, how are they changed by the market revolution? So farm equipment is a part of this. The mechanical reaper and the iron plow are mass produced, and these goods allow for greater output and harvest. They also allow for less investment in wages. You don't have to have as many hands, but you can still produce output. So this kind of specialization in farming will cause farmers to buy larger pieces of land. They will purposefully and intentionally plant crops for a surplus, to have a surplus so that they can turn around and sell those to market. I mentioned this already, new technology will lower the cost of these items, and the workers themselves will become consumers of these items. Okay, so new technologies in communication. The telegraph is invented in 1837 by Samuel Morse. It uses copper wire to transmit messages. These messages allow for immediate communication. Morse understands that this kind of technology can be used for good or evil, and he urged the federal government to kind of get involved and spearhead the implementation of the telegraph so that it could be done in a productive way. The federal government allotted Morse $30,000 to lay the first telegraph lines, and once the magnitude of the telegraph was really understood, that immediate communication, it went outside of government use into business use, and businesses could communicate the prices of their goods, the quantities of their goods. The railroad used the telegraph to communicate when arrival times, they would communicate arrival times. Oh, and they would even communicate if there was some danger on the railroad as well. So the telegraph is a revolutionary piece of technology as well. Okay, so transportation in the age of the market revolution. Early in the 1800s, let's see, 1820s, 30s, 40s, most states and even the federal government are investing in canals. The Erie Canal is the first major canal. The Erie Canal will connect the Atlantic seaboard is connected to the Great Lakes. Okay, so it starts in Albany, New York, it goes through Buffalo, and it will end on Lake Erie, and so this connection of the mid-Atlantic states, those Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, those states are now connected via canals to the Atlantic Ocean. The Erie Canal becomes an economic vein. Goods are transported across the Erie Canal, and this too will lower the cost of goods and will increase economic activity. The Erie Canal's completion begins this canal boom time. So here we see again another move that sort of isolates the South. The Erie Canal and these other canals are connecting the Northeast and the Northwest. So these two regions are interconnected. That Appalachian Mountain, it used to be the divide between the Northeast and the Midwest, but it no longer is the divide. Canals now connect these regions very much so economically. So grain that's produced in the Midwest is transported to northeastern cities where populations are growing through immigration. That's a very important connection, these canals. Okay, and the emergence of the railroad, this really doesn't happen until the 1850s. Railroads will become a greater investment. The investment in canals will decline as the investment in railroads increase. Railroads are obviously more economically efficient because of speed, simply because of speed. Another transportation initiative, I think I might have skipped over that earlier, is the steamboat. The steamboat, Robert Fulton invents the steamboat, and it makes waterways too vain. Waterways will become too vain. Prior to steamboats, you would drift down a raft, down a river like the Mississippi, and then you would have to walk back up. You could bring your good to market in New Orleans, let's say, for example, a city, but you would have to walk back up the Mississippi River, maybe all the way to Missouri or some other state along the river. However, steamboats will allow rivers to be two-vein. Now, the federal government, moving on here, the federal government is going to invest in modes of transportation, improvements in transportation to make that more efficient. And one of the first major investments of the federal government is in 1838, when they invest in the national road. They clear out forest area and create a road that is used for trading goods. It connects Cumberland, Maryland, all the way to Springfield, Illinois, and federal tax dollars will be used for the construction of this road, and it encourages other states and even local regions to do the same. Now, the South maintains its cash crop agricultural identity. They will rely heavily on their rivers. They do not invest heavily in railroads, nor do they invest in the creation of roads very heavily. And because of this, life in the South, as the North is sort of progressing and becoming more industrial, and what some might argue is they're more progressive, the South maintains its identity, and it doesn't invest in the Industrial Revolution, in this, or this market revolution, as we might call it. Now, Southerners also will criticize the North. They say that the North is overcrowded, that these immigrant workers are unhealthy, the lifestyles that they live are unhealthy, that they're uncouth, and that the way of life in the South is more cultured, the way of life in the South is cleaner and more holistic. So there's a lot of criticism from Southerners about the Northern way of life, and then the opposite is true. Many Northerners will criticize the Southern way of life, especially the institution of slavery is criticized by Northerners, and the lack of interest in industry will be criticized by Northerners as this, criticizing the Southern attitude, we might say. Okay. What do you guys want to know now? A couple of things here, new inventions that I've actually already mentioned. John Deere is responsible for inventing the steel plow. The steel plow will it will do a couple of things, because steel is lighter than iron, horses can pull it, and horses move faster than oxen, and so you're going to be able to break up more ground faster. So the steel plow will aid in farming. And then Cypress McCormick invents the mechanical reaper. Both of these items are mass-produced as a result of this market revolution. So farmers are becoming consumers, but these factories are mass-producing these economic goods. Now, manifest destiny. John L. O'Sullivan is a journalist who coins this term, manifest destiny. Manifest as in it is obvious, manifest as in it's obvious, and destiny as in it's God granted. Okay, this manifest destiny is the attitude that it is the will of God for the American government, the American people, the American way of life to extend to the Pacific Ocean. Now, there are those who support manifest destiny and who are proponents of it, and then there are those who are in opposition to it. I want you to think about why Americans might be opposed to expanding west and why Americans might be in support of expanding west. You want to understand the pro-expansion mindset and the anti-expansion mindset, but obviously John L. O'Sullivan was pro-expansion. Okay, so attitudes toward the frontier, American attitudes toward the frontier. The economic panic of 1837 had left many Americans with the close of banks, with a drop in economic activity and in